War in Ukraine. Halted US aid to Ukraine. Russian media are happy about the developments, and Europe and Canada collaborating. We have reports that the US is pausing all support to Ukraine, including support that was agreed by President Biden. Reports indicate that this will be in effect until President Zelensky apologizes, follows the US peace plan, and signs the mineral deal. While the steps Ukraine would need to take have not been spelled out, the above seems likely. Most analysts would indicate that the impact on Ukraine will be some months away, possibly until the summer. In Russian state TV, we are seeing very happy faces where they are now openly talking about spheres of influence in a triangle with Russia, China, and the USA. There is no question that the current winner is Russia, and that the Russia-US relationship is becoming more aligned. On the ground, we have ongoing Russian attacks, but they have settled on a lower level. Intermittently, we have Ukrainian counterattacks. Russia has the overall initiative, but that is at least intermittently contested by Ukrainian forces. Russian gains remains limited. Trump has announced that the 25% tariffs against Canada and Mexico will come into effect, and an additional 10% on China. Canada, Mexico, and China have all responded that they will answer with similar tariffs. Canada has a two-stage approach that would meet the tariffs within some weeks. Mexico has responded that they have a plan in place, and China has also stated that they will respond. The stock market has seen a decline since the introduction of the tariffs were confirmed. We can likely expect the stock market and growth will be impacted across the board. Inflation will come, but I expect that will take some time, as many companies have been preparing for this eventuality. We can likely expect significant inflation in all affected countries, and probably it will be higher in the USA. However, inflation is very difficult to assess. The EU will hold a meeting on Thursday where the UK of course will not be included as they are no longer part of the internal market. We can however expect that the EU, the UK and Canada will continue to hold high-level meetings to meet this new development. After the meeting in the UK, which included Canada but not the US, we had some suggestion of a coalition of the willing that should be formed, and that would be presented to the US administration. One has to question what impact that would have, except to show that Europe is trying. All indications are at the moment that the US administration remains disinterested. Conclusion. At this time, we are really seeing a two-pronged attack from the US administration. Militarily, they continue to pull away from Ukraine, and in Russia they are celebrating. The second prong is regarding the economy, where Trump is now introducing the promised tariffs. Militarily for Ukraine, the halted aid will have a medium to long-term impact. What Europe and Canada can do is less certain. We are getting additional aid packages, but by the nature of the situation, they will take time to have an effect. Here, ex-President Biden did a mistake in not pushing the aid earlier, which is now giving Trump the ability to halt that agreed upon aid. The total US aid has been 120 billion euros, but that has included aid that is now paused, and so that figure will likely have to be decreased. The USA has not given $300 or $350 billion, which Trump continues to state. That is simply false. It is also false that Europe has only given 100 billion euros. Total European aid announced is around 250 billion euros, with an additional 20 billion euros in the pipeline. The problem here is that aid allocated from Europe is only 135 billion euros. Will Ukrainian President Zelensky apologize to the US? Even though I do not think he has done anything to apologize for, it is not impossible he will. We have to realize he is trying to save his country, and the US remains a vital part of that. The biggest problem is that the US peace process is in fact a Russian peace process, so it is hard to see Ukraine agreeing to that. The problem is what Europe can do for Ukraine. While many analysts in Europe continue to state that NATO remains a valid defense alliance, the question I ask is that really the case? At the very least, Europe and Canada will need to prepare for a much weaker NATO. This does not mean that NATO should be disregarded, but that implementation of alternative structures should be initiated. The biggest threat for Europe is Russia, and even more so as the US administration continues to improve their relationship with Russia. Ukraine needs help because it is the right thing to do. A possibility is that European rearmament is placed around 2+%, and what else is needed is dedicated to Ukraine. Ukraine is in effect tying down the Russian army, so it is the most bang for the euro, and it is the right thing to do. Regarding the tariffs, we should expect higher inflation in the USA than in other countries, at least in the medium term. The reason is that the US, while a big market, is also dependent on cheap imports to fuel that market. To change that, prices will have to go up, irrespectively if US manufacturing is increased or if they rely on imported goods with tariffs. This means that US exports in the tariff areas will become less competitive on the world market. Here, US soft power is also taking a hit, and that in itself will also have an impact. We already have some reports that Canada is excluding some US companies from Canadian procurement. Additional such impacts are likely to continue. Now, the status quo outside the US is unlikely to remain. We can expect that Europe will start looking for new trade deals to diminish the impact of US tariffs, and Canada and the UK will likely be the first countries we can expect increased collaboration with. There are likely other markets that Europe and Canada could approach, and likely they will. But again, this is in the long term and will have no real impact in the short to medium term. I do expect a new European strategy will emerge, and that will probably include aligning with the UK and Canadian strategies. The way to combat a trade war is to increase free trade that does not include the USA, and so that is likely a development we can expect in the medium to long term. In the short term, we should expect increased financial disruption. Regarding what will happen with European defense industry, and that is not really tied into what will happen in NATO, is that it will likely move away from US material and components. That will also be a long-term project, but as France have shown, it is by no means impossible. Europe will need production capacity for rearming, and such rearming cannot be attached to a US foreign policy. So the likely conclusion is that some countries in Europe will now start to move in a European direction regarding defense procurement. Again, that is a long-term impact we can expect to see over the coming decades. All indications are that this is really a watershed moment, and it will likely have a long-term impact well beyond the specific areas mentioned in this video. The difference today as compared to the previous Trump administration is that the security threat and financial threats are happening at the same time. That means that the strategy of waiting is today not a viable one. Neither do I think that relying on the USA as a backstop for securing Ukraine is a valid strategy. At least this administration has not indicated that as a possibility. The main question remains, what else can Europe do for Ukraine? And that is by far the most important question to answer. For the USA, they are realigning closer to Russia, and that will likely be somewhat uncomfortable. But to what degree, that is impossible to say. End of report.